everybody. Welcome back to my show. My name is Allie. This is Heart and Soul Connected. And today I'm going to talk to you about Marguerite de Navarre, who was a 16th century French writer who wrote a series of stories in a book called the Heptameron. She was not able to complete it before she passed, but they made the book anyway. And what makes it so unusual? Actually, a woman. Women didn't write. Women were not writers. Not only that, maybe they wrote, but nobody would ever publish them. But Marguerite's they did, which is highly unusual, especially at the time period that this occurred. So it is a collection of novellas. It's a treasure trove of stories with romance and drama and moral lessons. It also chronicles the treatment of women at a time when we may not have known how they existed and under what conditions they lived. It showcases Marguerite's unique perspective on all of these things, including nature, love, and spirituality. And it's a work that has captivated readers for centuries. And it, as I indicated, it's a French writer at the time. So it wasn't easy for her to write this, as I indicated, because of the time period that she lived, when women were expected to prioritize domestic duty over intellectual pursuit, the care and loving of their husbands, and maybe even the horrific cuckolding, let's say, of their husband's business with other women. But despite those expectations, she found the courage to express herself through this writing, and it became published, which was amazing, like I say. Her personal struggles, including the challenges she faced as a woman in a patriarchal society, are reflected in the stories she tells. She was also influenced by the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation at the time, which was shaping the cultural and intellectual landscape of Europe. The historical context of the Heptameron is fascinating. She drew inspiration from her own life experiences, as well as folklore and mythology of her time. Her stories are set against the backdrop of the Pyrenees Mountains, where she spent much of her life. This unique blend of reality and fantasy helps to create a sense of depth and complexity in her works. Much later on, we will see men writing stories of cultural things that occurred in the times that they were living, but of course, always from the male perspective. While these are very valuable insights into the society in which they lived, this was even more valuable because it was written by a woman and about women and how they had to endure things in their lives. Although it's not an autobiography or even fact in many ways, the mythos of the time and the knowledge of what was going on in a general sense was fabulous in uncovering how women lived during the 16th century. So she was determined to write this, but she did have a lot of challenges. She faced criticism and skepticism for those who doubted her abilities as a writer, and mostly because she was a woman. She persevered, though, driven by her passion for storytelling and her desire to share her insights with others. Her courage in the face of adversity is a testament to her strength and resilience as a woman and a writer. Some of the information contained inside talks about how women were sent to convents and they had to live their lives out in convents after having some kind of trouble with men. And there's a lot of stories that are in the Heptameron that are just fascinating with regard to how women were treated, how young they were when they were treated as poorly as they were, and, you know, what was happening and never really changed over the time period in which she wrote. The Heptameron is a tapestry of stories that explore the complexities of human nature. The characters are multidimensional and relatable with their own motivations and flaws. That is another unusual thing in the writing of the time. A lot of times there's flat writing. You don't feel the information about the emotional lives of characters. You're only told, for instance, that this person was this tall, and perhaps dressed this way, and they're flat characters. They're not round, as they call them, with real lives and real feelings and real understanding. Through the experiences, she conveys moral lessons, and these moral lessons are conveyed very, very well through characters who are treated abysmally by the patriarchal society and the constraints that were imposed upon them at the time and even much later in time. Her stories are entertaining, thought-provoking, and they make it a work that resonates with people even today. One of her most interesting aspects is the use of storytelling to explore the deeper themes. Her tales are often humorous, sometimes shocking, but always engaging. They invite readers to reflect on their own circumstances, their own values and assumptions, and make it a more timely and timeless work. The characters are flawed and realistic. One surprising insight is its connection to the oral tradition of storytelling. Before we had the advent of writing, and even after we had the advent of writing, we had stories that came down over the years. It reminds me of the telephone game where you're whispering into someone's ear, they whisper, they whisper, they whisper, and so it goes. And so when you're dealing with that, you're also dealing with the idea that things change over time and how people hear them and how people see them and how they explain them in their interpretations. She weaved the folk tales and legends of native France into the stories as well. And this was a way to explore deeper themes and moral lessons that have been influential in the development of Western literature. There's something about reading world literature that is so more satisfying, to myself anyway, than reading American literature over and over again. American literature has this little tiny window, even with women. A lot of women weren't published or even taken seriously until the 20th century. A couple of them have been able to come out and be found in the 19th century, very near to the club, but in the 1890s. But most women weren't even allowed to write, or they wrote under a pseudonym. And we see that in the British stories as well. But we have a whole bulk of literature in the world tradition that goes way back, some 25,000 years, in fact, and is filled with timeless themes and interesting premises. So I can't speak enough to world literature over the idea of American literature. So Marguerite's stories highlight also the struggles and triumphs of her character. Her writing is characterized by nuance and sensitivity. And they're filled with references to customs and traditions and values of the time. One of the characters who is in here is a very young girl of about 13 years old, and she's being stalked, is the best way to say it, by a man who is much older than her and who is constantly bothering her, and not in a very good way. As time goes on, her mother doesn't seem to care much about her and her feelings about it. And it comes to a very high tipping point when, over that tipping point, she is calling upon her mother to help her as the man that's not being very nice to her becomes more and more aggressive to her, leading her eventually to going to live in a convent. It chronicles the idea of patriarchal power, and it also speaks to how women have been treated for oh so very long. And even in the 16th century, we see a lot that can be juxtaposed into our own time period and how women have been treated in our own time period. Marguerite de Navarre didn't give up. She wrote when she was told not to write. She wrote about what she saw and what she knew. And her work, even though not completed, because she passed before she could get every one of these stories out, is a valuable, valuable look at the 16th century France lifestyle. Thank you so very much. Have a beautiful day.